Good evening and welcome to Kenya News Update today. I'm your host, and we're diving deep into a story that connects corporate diplomacy, international relations, and Kenya's own energy future. Our focus, the recent Lunar New Year celebration hosted by Vivo Energy Uganda for the Chinese community in Kampala, and what it signals for the broader East African region, including Kenya. This is a 12-minute analysis of the players, the politics, and the potential impact. Let's begin. First, the event itself. On Friday, February 28, 2026, executives from Vivo Energy Uganda gathered with Chinese business leaders and government officials in Kampala. The occasion was the celebration of the Lunar New Year, a major cultural festival for Chinese communities worldwide. The imagery was one of partnership, a cake-cutting ceremony, smiles, and handshakes. But beneath the surface, this was a strategic business move. Vivo Energy, it's crucial to note, is not a Chinese company. It is a British downstream petroleum company, a major player in fuel distribution across Africa. So why is a British firm hosting Chinese officials in Uganda? The answer lies in the complex web of energy, investment, and influence in our region. Let's break down Vivo Energy's position. The company operates in 23 African countries, with a network of over 2,500 service stations. In Kenya, they are a significant presence, operating the Shell brand under license. Their parent company, Vital, is one of the world's largest independent energy traders. This gives Vivo immense logistical and financial muscle. Now, consider the guest list, the Chinese business community in Uganda. China is, without question, Africa's largest bilateral trading partner and a colossal source of infrastructure financing. In Uganda alone, Chinese firms are involved in major projects like the Kampala-Entebbe Expressway and the Karuma hydroelectric power station. By hosting this event, Vivo Energy is not just being polite. It is actively courting the very community that represents a key conduit for Chinese capital and contracts. It's a soft power play, positioning Vivo as the preferred local partner for Chinese enterprises needing reliable fuel supply chains. This brings us to our first key perspective, the corporate strategy angle. Analysts we spoke to suggest this is a preemptive move. With global energy transitions accelerating, traditional oil companies are fiercely competing for market share in growing African economies. The Chinese market, both in terms of companies operating in Africa and the vehicles they use, is a massive segment. By building strong social and business ties, Vivo secures a loyal customer base for its petroleum products. One energy sector consultant, speaking on background, estimated that Chinese-linked projects and transport fleets in East Africa could account for up to 15% of Vivo's regional commercial fuel sales. That's a multi-million-dollar revenue stream they're explicitly trying to lock down with events like this Lunar New Year celebration. But there's a second, more geopolitical layer to this story. The event happened in Uganda, but its implications rippled directly into Kenya. Kenya has long positioned itself as the commercial and logistical gateway to East Africa. The standard gauge railway, built by China Road and Bridge Corporation, is the most visible symbol of Sino-Kenyan cooperation. However, Uganda has been aggressively courting Chinese investment for its own oil development projects, like the Tailanga and Kingfisher fields. By strengthening its ties with the Chinese community in Kampala, Vivo Energy is embedding itself at the heart of a potential new energy corridor. If Ugandan oil flows and related infrastructure boom, Vivo wants to be the one fueling that boom. This could subtly shift some economic gravity from Mombasa and Nairobi towards Kampala, a concern for Kenyan policymakers. Now, let's contrast this with a major development right here in Kenya, announced just days after the Vivo event. On Sunday, March 1st, 2026, President William Ruto launched a monumental 45 billion shilling program to solarize all public schools in the country within 1 year. The pilot began at Alliance High School during its centenary celebrations. This is a landmark commitment to green energy. President Ruto framed it as turning the century-old institution into a testing ground for the nation's green ambitions. The program is a joint venture, though the specific partners were not fully detailed in the initial announcement. This initiative aims to power over 23,000 public primary and secondary schools with solar energy, a move that would not only cut electricity costs, but also serve as a massive educational tool on renewables. Here lies the fascinating debate. On one hand, you have Vivo Energy, a fossil fuel giant, deepening its relationship with the world's manufacturing powerhouse, China, to secure the future of petroleum-based energy in East Africa. On the other, you have the Kenyan government under President Ruto, making a bold, expensive pivot towards solar power for a critical public institution, schools, Are these paths contradictory or can they coexist? Let's hear from two experts. Dr. Aisha Mwenda, an energy economist at the University of Nairobi, argues for coexistence. We must be pragmatic, she says. The energy transition will take decades. While we invest in solar for schools, the trucks building our roads, the generators for hospitals, and the machinery for industry will still run on diesel and petrol for the foreseeable future. Companies like Vivo provide that essential stability. Their outreach to Chinese firms is simply smart business, ensuring efficient fuel distribution for the infrastructure projects that are, ironically, building our modern economy, including potentially more renewable grids. However, environmental activist James Kari Uki from the Green Belt movement sees a conflict. The Vivo event is a stark reminder of the entrenched power of the fossil fuel lobby, he contends. While Kenya announces a visionary 45 billion shilling solar project, worth approximately 420 million US dollars, the oil industry is busy weaving stronger ties with the world's largest emitter. China is building coal plants back home and financing fossil projects abroad. This cozy relationship in Uganda directly undermines the spirit of our national solar commitment. Every shilling spent on diesel for Chinese-built projects is a shilling, not accelerating our own clean energy independence. Let's quantify some of these points with specific data, starting with Vivo's footprint. In Kenya, Vivo Energy operates approximately 230 retail service stations. They employ directly over 1,200 Kenyans, with thousands more in their extended supply chain. Their annual fuel throughput is estimated at over 2 billion liters. Now, consider the Chinese footprint. Chinese contractors are currently engaged in at least 15 major infrastructure projects in Kenya, with a combined value exceeding 800 billion shillings. These projects, from roads to dams, represent a massive, concentrated demand for fuel. If even a conservative 20% of that fuel demand is met through Vivo's network, we're talking about a contract volume of hundreds of millions of liters annually. This isn't just a party, it's a revenue strategy. Now, look at President Ruto's Solar Schools plan. The 45 billion shilling price tag breaks down to roughly 1.96 million shillings per school. The goal is to install systems that can power computer labs, lights, and administrative offices. Assuming an average installation size of 10 kilowatts per school, the national program would add about 230 megawatts of decentralized solar capacity. To put that in perspective, that's equivalent to about a quarter of the capacity of the Tor Khan wind power project. It's a significant push. The government hopes this will save schools an estimated 3.5 billion shillings in annual electricity bills, money that could be redirected to learning materials. So, where does this leave us? The Vivo Energy event in Uganda highlights a continued, even intensifying, reliance on fossil fuels to power regional economic growth, heavily tied to Chinese capital and construction. Kenya's Solar Schools initiative showcases a parallel drive towards a greener, more self-sufficient energy future. The question for Kenyan viewers is this: which model is more sustainable for our development? Are we, as a region, locking ourselves into another generation of fossil dependency through these corporate state alliances, even as we make symbolic green strides at home? There's also a diplomatic nuance. The United States, under President Donald Trump, has historically been skeptical of China's Belt and Road Initiative and its influence in Africa. While the current administration's specific stance on East African energy politics is unclear, this dynamic forms a backdrop. A British company like Vivo facilitating closer Chinese business integration presents a complex picture for Western foreign policy observers. In conclusion, the cake cutting in Kampala was more than a cultural celebration. It was a snapshot of the fierce competition to define Africa's energy pathway. Vivo Energy is playing a long game, aligning itself with the most prolific builders on the continent. Kenya, meanwhile, is attempting an ambitious national green project. The truth likely lies in the middle. Our economies will run on a hybrid mix for years. The real test will be whether initiatives like the Solar Schools program can scale and accelerate fast enough to outpace the entrenched interests symbolized by that Lunar New Year gathering. The next year, as both the Ugandan oil projects and Kenya's school solar rollout progress, will be telling. That's our deep dive for this evening. We've looked at the corporate strategy, the geopolitical undercurrents, and the national policy contrasts. It's a story about energy, influence, and the choices that will shape our region's future. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to Kenya News Update today for more detailed analysis. Good night.